It powers our cars, it lights up our cities, it's shaped our entire modern world in ways we probably don't even realize. But how did this sticky, black gunk we call crude oil become the absolute lifeblood of our civilization? Well, this is the story of its incredible rise to power and, yeah, the massive crises it created along the way. So, to really get a grip on oil's power, we don't need to stare at some complicated chart. Nope. We just need to go back to one very specific moment in time when, pretty much without any warning, everything just stopped. Okay, picture this. It's October 1973. In response to the Yom Kippur War, Arab oil-producing nations put an embargo on exports to countries that supported Israel. And just like that, the taps were turned off. I mean, you had cars lining up for miles, entire industries grinding to a halt. The whole world was just holding its breath. The impact was immediate and honestly catastrophic. In just 4 months, the global price of oil skyrocketed. We're talking an unbelievable 400% jump. It went from around $3 a barrel to nearly $12. This wasn't just a price increase. It was an economic shockwave that was felt in every single corner of the globe. And the fallout? It was immense. Whole economies were just crippled. Factories that were humming along one day fell silent the next. You had superpowers like the United States being shoved into a recession. And for developing nations like India, the crisis was absolutely devastating. This was the exact moment the world truly learned how dependent it had become on so-called black gold. But here's the thing. Oil wasn't always this powerful, not even close. To really understand how we got to this point, we need to rewind the clock. And I'm not talking just decades. We have to go back thousands of years. For most of human history, crude oil was just this weird, sticky stuff that seeped out of the ground. It was more of a curiosity than a commodity. Yeah, for millennia, different civilizations just kind of stumbled upon oil. The ancient Egyptians, they used it as a healing balm. The Chinese were way ahead of the game, drilling for it with bamboo poles as early as 347 CE to help produce salt. When it was found in Japan, they gave it the very literal name, burning water. Even the famous explorer Marco Polo wrote about seeing it bubbling from the ground in what's now Azerbaijan. So, yeah, it was interesting, but it hadn't changed the world yet. So what was it? What was the spark that ignited this whole oil revolution? Well, it wasn't a car. It wasn't a factory. It was something much more basic. The simple human desire for light. See, before the mid-1800s, the best way to get light at night was from whale oil. But it was incredibly expensive, and the whole industry was controlled by this massive American whaling fleet. Then, in 1846, this Canadian scientist develops kerosene from crude oil, and it was a total game changer. It was bright, it was clean, and maybe most important of all, it was 15 times cheaper. All of a sudden, the night wasn't quite so dark anymore for the average person. Kerosene created this huge demand for crude oil, right? But getting this stuff out of the ground was still a messy, difficult, and super unpredictable business. It was going to take a retired railroad worker named Edwin Drake to change everything. So, an oil company hires Drake, sends him to rural Pennsylvania with what seemed like an impossible job: drill for oil. The locals thought he was nuts. They actually called him Crazy Drake. And at first, his attempts were a total disaster. The holes he dug just kept flooding with water. It really looked like failure was inevitable. But Drake didn't give up. He came up with this clever idea to use a cast iron pipe to keep the water out. And his steam-powered drill just kept pushing deeper. And then, on August 27, 1859, at just 69.5 feet deep, he hit it. He'd struck oil. He created the world's first commercial oil well, and in doing so, kicked off an American oil rush that would literally change the country forever. So, America quickly became the world's top oil producer. But as demand for this new energy source absolutely exploded, the hunt was on for even bigger reserves. And this search, well, it would shift the entire balance of global power. The new frontier wasn't in the hills of Pennsylvania or some field in Texas. No, the real prize, the kind of reserves that would make everything else look tiny, was hidden under the sands of the Middle East. I mean, just look at the transformation of Saudi Arabia. Before an American company found oil there in 1938, it was one of the poorest nations on earth. Its economy was basically based on pilgrims and farming dates. After oil, it became one of the wealthiest. A global power quite literally built on a sea of black gold. And this same story played out again and again across the region. Okay, so with all this wealth and power on the line, a new challenge popped up. Now you got lots of countries producing oil, and all that competition was starting to drive prices down. These producers needed a way to control their most valuable resource. So, in 1960, 5 nations got together: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. And they formed a cartel, OPEC. The goal was pretty simple: work together to manage oil production, stabilize prices, and basically seize control from the Western companies and countries that had been calling the shots for so long. And over the next few decades, boy, did the world feel OPEC's power. It came in these huge seismic shocks. First, you had that 1973 embargo we started with. Then it happened again in 1979 when the Iranian Revolution caused another supply crisis. And of course, most recently in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic just shattered global demand. In April of 2020, something happened that had never, ever happened before. The world's on lockdown, nobody's driving, nobody's flying, and there was so much extra oil that the price of a barrel actually went negative. Think about that. Sellers were literally paying buyers just to take the oil off their hands. Wild. All of these crises, from the embargo back in '73 all the way to negative prices in 2020, have brought us to a really critical moment. We've seen the incredible progress that oil has fueled, but we've also gotten a very clear look at its dark side. And we have to be honest about the true cost, right? Our dependence on oil has led to so many problems: widespread air and water pollution, devastating oil spills, deforestation, and, of course, it's the #1 driver of climate change. The very same substance that built our modern world is now threatening its future. Which leaves us with this final, really urgent question. The age of oil powered a century of growth and innovation that was completely unprecedented. But as we look to the future, with things like renewable energy and electric vehicles on the rise, we have to ask ourselves, can the civilization that Black Gold built actually learn to live without it?